I always ask this. Can you hear me okay? I had a little trouble hearing Valerie, so I wanted to check. Okay. What to the slave is the 4th of July? Frederick Douglass, 1852. Happy birthday, America. In America, USA, how race shadows the nation's anniversaries. Eddie Glaude, University Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, gives us two gifts. The first gift is that he provocatively, with story, diagnoses our doubleness or double consciousness by examining the battles over who had a stake in writing the American story. As he reviewed the history of America's birth celebrations, commemorations, beginning in 1876. In the chapter titled, Freedom is the White Man's Gift, Glaude tells the story of Moses Gordon, who was granted his freedom in 1776, 3 months after the signing of the Declaration of Independence by Caleb Trueblood, a slaveholding North Carolina Quaker. 2.5 years later, he was arrested and sold to William Skinner. In 1785, Gordon stole his freedom and escaped to Philadelphia, where he married and began raising a family over a 10-year period. However, the Fugitive Slave Clause in the Constitution and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 was relentless, as Gordon was hunted down and returned to Skinner. When faced with the prospect of living once again as a slave, Gordon stole his life. I was struck by the sort of draconian rhythm of this story. I think that stories like this may give us, if we use our imagination, a sense of awe, leading to an ultra-view effect, a sense of humility, and a desire to explore solutions, not unlike that described by Deanna Weibel. Some might claim that the Gordon story is anecdotal. Yes, but we know that this kind of event has happened many thousands of times over the past 250 years. The Gordon story also made me wonder what stories our own Doris Rucks and Spencer Norman lose it could have added to Glaude's. Glaude admits that his rendition of history was written with a sense of anguish and a touch of anger. He claims that since its founding, America was at once a nation of laws that reflected the equal standing of each individual and a white republic. He states that freedom animates our way of life, yet is primarily in the possession of white people that can be given to others or taken away with impunity. This double consciousness is the consequence of a nation that defines itself with the foundation principle of the equality and justice for all, and yet holds others as chattel or resigns them to second-class status. Glaude claims that this principle and the practice cannot coexist without contradiction, and to hold them together as if they can is a form of madness. He concludes that American double consciousness is the outcome of a nation that represents itself as the shining city on the hill and a redeemer nation with a manifest destiny, yet sees itself darkly through the eyes of those who have borne the whiplash and declare the country as wanting. This contradiction or doubleness is akin to what W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about in his classic 1903 book, The Souls of Black Folk, where he declared that the problem of the 20th century was the problem of the color line and the separation between the worlds of black and white folk. He describes the effects of this duality on the way black people saw themselves, and I quote, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and play. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring souls in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. In his final chapter, Claude appears to atone for his anger, hoping for a future where love breaks through, however, not in a sentimental way, but the kind of love that motivated colored people to imagine a future as a free people who believed that hatred must never have the last word. Claude suggested that what remains may not be hope, but something just as lasting, the insistence on truth, carried by love, that was lit by rage. Now, the U.S. Congress created July 4th as a federal holiday in 1870, 5 years after the Civil War ended. However, free black people were not allowed to participate in most celebrations on that day in the past. Why? The mere presence of black people at those celebrations, acting as if freedom belonged to them, exposed the lie that America was not a nation committed to liberty and equality, which was always at the heart of the 4th of July rituals. In response to this type of erasure in history past, and perhaps even now, black people instead recognized their freedom the day after July 4th in the form of celebration, memorial, and critique. That is, decrying their nation's hypocrisy, the black community gathered to celebrate an idea of freedom that the nation refused to embrace. To wit, Frederick Douglass's 1852 question, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" is forever relevant. You may ask, so what? Well, today's my birthday, July 5th. Don't sing, please. Though I don't think I'm a racist or a white nationalist, I felt complicit after reading Claude's book. So from this day forward, I can no longer go along with the traditional July 4th celebrations that are based on a contradiction that has savaged human beings. For me, July 4th will forever be a muted celebration until America looks in the mirror with remorse and decides to remake herself. Until then, I will join my colored brothers and sisters on July 5th as a remembrance of our collective failures, memorial for all those who have suffered and died because of past and ongoing white rage, and a critique of our continued failure to demand the freedom, equality, and justice non-white brothers and sisters were guaranteed at America's founding. It's so wonderful to see so many of you here today. My friends who are also critical thinkers, and those of you who are watching online, will you join us? What was Claude's second gift? Well, in his book, he included a copy of a solo piano composition titled "And Blue" by the classical artist Joel Thompson, written exclusively for his book. If you're interested in hearing the composer describe his motivation and intent for the composition and a performance of the piece, check out the link to a YouTube premiere provided by Brad's gathering follow-up email in the coming days. Namaste.